I've got a new toy. It's a DJI Mini 2 flying camera. I've also got a Lotus Elite Type 75, whose paintwork is so rubbish that it looks a great deal better when it's quite a small dot in quite a big landscape. And I want to combine these two things and go and do some filming. And I want to do it on this salt marsh, before the tide comes in and floods everything. The only problem is that the Lotus was last seen leaking coolant, running hot, and having to be pushed back into the shed. If you're a regular to Grand Thrift Auto, then you'll recognise this as my 1976 Lotus Elite. And it's got a bit of a running issue, which I can only describe as Schrödinger's coolant leak, which means that it simultaneously does and doesn't leak coolant. It exists in both states and only crystallises into one or the other, seemingly at random, at the point at which you try and measure it. So I'm going to test the system with the help of this set, which is a pressure testing kit. It comes with this range of different caps that go over your coolant reservoir, but instead of just being a cap, they've got these valves on, which this pump fits onto, and you pump it up to pressure, and it's got a pressure gauge there as well, and then you just leave it there and see whether it's holding pressure or not. If it is, happy days. If it's not, then you've got a leak somewhere. Now, if I look at the cap here, it says, it's not very readable, but that says it's £9 pressure cap. So £9 per square inch, I assume that means. And so I'm going to pump this up to 9 psi on the valve here. Then we'll see whether it holds it. I can hear a dripping noise already. So that's at £10. Let's have a look underneath the car. Yeah, okay, that's not good. So the good news is the pressure testing kit works. The bad news is there's a fairly impressive coolant leak from somewhere at the bottom of the engine of the Lotus. So let's get it up on some ramps and investigate a bit further. So there's definite signs of dampness at the bottom of the radiator, plus an intrepid but slightly misguided snail. As I look around the engine, I can see that there's some moisture escaping from what looks like the join between the main block and the crankcase. So at the moment I'm staring down both barrels of a full engine rebuild. Lotus Bits has already built the head of this engine, and it looks like it might be the turn of the bottom half. There's no sign of mayonnaise indicating that the coolant is getting into the oilways and suggesting head gasket failure, so I've ruled that out at least. So I went away to scratch my head for a bit, and as a displacement activity, I replaced a couple of the remaining fuel hoses with something ethanol-proof and tightened things up to stop the last seepage around the carburetors. Then I drove it home and did a couple of short trips just to see what happens. And what happened was that the coolant level seems to settle at about this point. So it doesn't disappear out of the header tank, but settles at this level somewhere near the bottom. And when I next looked underneath the car, it was all nice and dry. So the coolant leak appears to have stopped. So I'm wondering whether what I've done, in fact, is in using this pressure tester, I've pumped it up slightly too high. And what's happened is that the valve in the header tank cap has released, and coolant has simply escaped down this outlet hose and sprayed around the engine bay. And then, when the pressure has returned to where it should be, the valve has closed off and sorted itself out. This is just a theory, and I have no way of proving it other than taking the car for a ride, putting it in some traffic, and seeing what happens. So let's do that. So this is a bit of a test. We've just been through Gowden, which has got a couple of sets of traffic lights. They can get quite jammy, so it's done quite a bit of standing, but all good so far. We've still got the temperature needle on the dead vertical here. The oil pressure's gone a bit low, but it always does when it's idling. Voltmeter is also on the dead straight ahead. and it's now reading 2/3 full of fuel, which is good, so that means the fuel gauge is working. Happy days. So all good so far, but we haven't yet got to the bit where the tide comes in over the road, so fingers crossed. So this is the Marsh Road. South Gower is the one with the really picturesque beaches and sandy coves and cliffs. But the North Gower coast here is, I think, if anything, well, it's a different kind of beautiful. It's dominated by this salt marsh, which is grazed by ponies and sheep and what have you. And at really high tides, it does get covered by the sea and becomes the estuary of the River Locher. So if we park here and we break down, we've only got a few hours to fix it. So the question is, do we feel lucky? Moment of truth. That's a very good start. And we're mobile. We'll stop filming now. And so, yes, we made it to safety before the tide came in and swept the Lotus away, and home safely in time for tea without overheating and without any loss of coolant. So who knows, maybe I just broke it by pumping it up too much with my pressure tester. Anyway, for now, I'm going to take that and declare victory. The Lotus is fit for longer runs. It's running as smoothly as it ever has, I think, in my ownership. And I'm going to make the most of that while the sun's shining and until the next thing happens. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's do it all again soon.